one big collective breath in on the count of 3. 1, 2, 3. Go ahead and let it out. Before we welcome Peter to the Zoom stage, just want to give a special shout out to Northern Michigan Environmental Action Council, the Michigan Climate Action Network, and For Love of Water. Can we give them spirit fingers, energy throws, silent claps, whatever you would like? Let's acknowledge these amazing groups that have brought this many people, 119 people, probably another 5, 10, 15 people joining by the end of this. Also a special shout out to Bill Latka for helping to digitally make this so convenient for all of us to have a registration process and for all of us to tune in so easily. And with that being said, my name's Jeremy Reisig. Some of you know me as Brother James. It's an absolute honor to be here with all of you. And my job is to get out of the way as fast as I can so that we can get Peter up and running. How many of you have followed Peter Sinclair in one way, shape, or form over the years? One way, shape, or form? And how many of you, this is the first time you've had an opportunity to spend time with Peter? Cool. Peter's going to do his own introduction because he has a much more powerful way of being able to introduce himself than I ever could. What I can say is he's a great guy to collaborate with. He knows his stuff, and he has been a world-traveling videographer and journalist around the topic of climate change in our environment. So one more time, let's all welcome Peter Sinclair with a collective spirit fingers, because that's the one thing we can all see on this Zoom. Peter, thank you so much for being here. Take it away, my friend.
Okay, great. Thank you so much, Jeremy. Thank you, Bill. Thank you, everybody, for organizing this, and thank all you folks for showing up. I'm going to jump right into this as quickly as possible. You don't need to look at me. I want to share my screen and get some videos moving and some information as quickly as possible. I've been working very hard to make this as current, still doing interviews up until this morning for this program. So one moment here.
And while Peter's taking that moment, just a little Zoom tip for you. If at any point in time you notice that you're on a screen of 49 people or 30 some people, and you find yourself leaning in to try and see the picture because there's 36 small squares, in the upper right-hand corner of your Zoom screen, there's going to be a button, and that button will say View. And when you click on that View button, it will give you an ability to see gallery view or speaker view. And so you're able to select that. When he's sharing screen, you can select side by side with just the speaker, or you can choose a gallery and scroll through. I just wanted to give those quick little instructions. So if you're new to Zoom, you know that upper right-hand corner in many ways controls your visual experience.
Okay, are we good? All right. So as Jeremy mentioned, I am Peter Sinclair. I am a videographer. For the last 15 years, I've been very much focused on climate change and climate solutions. And doing videos, which I'm probably most proud of the number of scientists that have begun to follow my videos. And for the last 10 years almost now, they have begun to invite me out into the field to places where you can see climate change happening in some of the most dramatic fashion, from glaciers of the Pacific Northwest to the interior of Greenland, where I first went with my colleague Jason Box in 2013. This is deep in the interior of Greenland, a place called Saddle, where I believe we were the first team to ever go in there in a helicopter, taking some samples with Dr. Box and some of his colleagues. Something I've continued to do in most of the last decade every year. 2014, this was Dark Snow Camp as viewed from a NASA satellite. We were looking at this water, meltwater running on the surface of Greenland, taking some samples and trying to do some investigation on how fast that melt is occurring and what happens to this water when it starts to go down into the interior of the ice sheet, where where we were right there, probably a kilometer or two deep, and lots of dramatic stuff happening where that water goes, not only the effects that it has on the ice, but also what happens to it when it goes out into the Atlantic Ocean. Some of you may know, for the last decade or so, I've been doing a monthly series of videos called This Is Not Cool for Yale Climate Connections. I'm going to start with this one because it illustrates a major challenge that we have, which is the disinformation in regard to climate change. And the nexus of that disinformation, I think globally, is Fox News. So I think this video shows you just how brazen and just how corrupt Fox News is in doing messaging about climate change. And it's something we need to understand when we're interacting with other people who may only exist or live within that bubble. So let's jump right in.
Never in the American West has so much burned so quickly or so destructively. From Washington State to Southern California, entire communities were wiped out.
There is not a single scientist on Earth who knows whether or by how much these fires may have been, quote, exacerbated by warmer temperatures caused by climate change.
We are having more fires. There's been a large increase in the area burned by fires in the western U.S. Since the 1970s. And some scientists estimate that about half of that is due to anthropogenic climate change.
All we have is conjecture from a handful of scientists and many politicians, none of whom has reached a definitive conclusion.
Climate change has dried things out and warmed things up, and it's increased the risk of wildfire.
Daniel Swain, for example, he's a climate scientist at UCLA, conceded recently that it's, quote, hard to determine whether climate change played a role in sparking the fires. Okay, that's what science is.
I actually haven't given any interviews for Fox News. I haven't spoken with Tucker directly or anyone on his staff. So apparently what happened was his program pulled a quote from an MIT Tech Review article about from a few weeks ago about the lightning sparked fires in Northern California.
The article Fox News refers to appeared in MIT Technology Review in August of 2020. The title of the article was, "Yes, climate change is almost certainly fueling California's massive fires." The article did include a paraphrase attributed to Dr. Swain in regard to the frequency of large lightning events like the one which sparked several fires in August of 2020.
It was a paraphrase by the original journalist regarding what I had said about the rarity of lightning-sparked wildfires in a place like coastal California. The fact that there are very rarely widespread lightning events that produce tens of thousands of lightning strikes in the middle of summer in that part of the world, and why, because of that, it's difficult to say whether there's much of a climate influence on the occurrence of these big lightning events because they occur so infrequently. We just don't have a lot of data to say either way. The reality is there are always going to be sparks that can start a fire. So the real question is, what happens given that spark? And all of the evidence points in a direction strongly suggesting that these fires are becoming larger, more intense, and behaving more extremely because of climate change.
The Fox News report also neglected the very next paragraph, another paraphrase from Dr. Swain, which is that extreme weather attribution studies have clearly and repeatedly found that climate change exacerbates heat waves, which help create the conditions for wildfires to burn intensely and spread rapidly.
And some people can say, oh, well, doesn't fire depend on what humans do? The fire management, the land management. And that's true. But the extent of the fires, how big the fires grow, really depends on the weather.
A lot of the droughts we're seeing around the world, for example, in the southwest US, isn't like a drought of yore. It's actually an aridification. And that's because the earth is warming up and because circulation patterns are changing in a way that are drying out some of these drier regions.
We did have a century where we tried to put out every single fire as quickly as possible, irrespective of how close it was to populated areas or how much risk it actually posed to humans. And because of that deficit of natural, lower intensity, good fire, as it's often called these days, there was a buildup of unusually dense vegetation, which has become, unfortunately, a buildup of unusually dense fuel for wildfire over the past few decades.
There's a lot of argument out west that we need to do more controlled burns, more thinning of forests, and certainly that could reduce the risk of these large wildfires. But the job is gigantic, and we don't have the resources to do it.
Now, that's only relevant in the forests. The chaparral fires in Southern California, for example, are not the product of fire suppression policies in the 20th century. But acting on top of it is climate change. And just about all the fire scientists I've talked to agree that climate change is making even that problem worse than it would be otherwise, because, well, it has increased the fuel loads, but that wouldn't be quite as much of a problem as it is today if we hadn't dried out those fuels to the point where they are so liable to burn so easily and so intensely.
Not just one climate model, all the climate models, they predict uniformly higher temperatures and drought in much of the western US by 2050, or certainly 2100. How will the mean or the median amount of area burned change? We did that multiple ways, using multiple approaches, and every time we found really large increases in the area burned. Some of the increases in some regions, in some approaches, were only 25%, but other places we get changes on the order of 400%. That is, the area burned in the future is 4 times what it is in the present day.
So, a good warning about fires, the relation to climate, and also about the disinformation, which is probably the biggest challenge. And we're going to talk more about that. But I want to pivot here to a topic of abrupt climate change. And many of us, if we remember the movie Day After Tomorrow in 2004, maybe this is the image that comes to mind when we think of abrupt climate change. This is, of course, wildly over the top Hollywood fantasy and not something anyone is predicting scientifically. But there are processes that we are concerned about that can give us substantial change in relatively short periods of time. Yesterday's Washington Post mentioned a new study talking about circulation in the North Atlantic, what most people commonly call the Gulf Stream, and whether that stream might be slowing down. That was actually kind of the grain of truth behind the movie Day After Tomorrow. Again, not something that most scientists really expect to be a huge factor in our lifetime, but the system of currents that includes the Gulf Stream is now in its weakest state in at least 1,000 years, meaning that's as far back as the data goes. So clearly something is happening, and it has a lot to do with what's going on in Greenland. But there are other sources of sudden change that we're going to talk about, but I'm going to delve a little bit deeper with a video that I recorded in Greenland, I believe in 2017. I had an interview with J.P. Stephenson, who is probably one of the globe's great experts on drilling ice cores. And ice cores in both Greenland and Antarctica can be read much the same way tree rings can be read and tell us things about what's happened in the past, and we can apply those to what might happen in the future. This is one of my favorite videos. It's called Inside the Experiment.
The last 11,000 years, that's since the Ice Age, this our interglacial period has been unreasonably stable. And we don't know why. With an enhanced greenhouse effect from burning of fossil fuel, CO2 and methane and so on, you would have a gradual increase in temperature. That's what all the models show you. It's sort of a gradual increase in temperature. But that's assuming that the climate plays nice. And we actually know from the ice cores that the climate does not play nice all the time. Right now, by emitting greenhouse gases, we are doing the same with the climate system as the investment banks in the US did when they were selling subprime loans in the economy in 2006 and 7. In the last million years, there's been a cycle of approximately 10 ice ages. And they were sort of around 90,000 years long, each of them. And then there was an interglacial period separating the ice ages of about 10,000 years. That's sort of the standard rule of events in the last million years. If we then zoom in on an ice age, you see that inside an ice age, the climate is extremely unstable. And you have this sequence of abrupt climate changes that happen basically from one year to the next. And it swings from semi-cold to very cold, semi-cold to very cold, within very short spaces of time. But each of these cycles is about a couple of thousand years long. And we had that 26 times in the last ice age. All the big cultures in India, China, Mesopotamia, Egypt, South America, all came after the ice age. So we are assuming that this is the standard. Our collective memory refers to this as this is normal. And maybe by enhancing our emissions of greenhouse gases, we are actually tipping the climate system to become yet unstable again as it used to be. We can face a climate change that happens just as sudden as a financial crisis. We have tons of examples of climate changes where we see complete reorganization of the atmospheric circulation from one year to the next. And that will be extremely hurtful for any agricultural activity in the world because the weather will change and will not change back. Fast climate transitions, these abrupt climate changes that we see recorded in the Ice Age, they were discovered in the Greenland ice cores. But now they keep finding them everywhere in the marine sediments, wherever they look. But when it comes to Antarctica and the Southern Ocean, you don't see them. What you see there, it's also a wiggly climate line, but opposite. So when it's warm in Greenland, Antarctica cools off. And when it's cold in Greenland, Antarctica warms up. So these abrupt climate changes, it's an internal oscillation in the Earth climate system. What if what we do now is introducing so much fresh water into the North Atlantic that the North Atlantic current would sort of stop? That would make it terribly cold in Denmark, where I come from, because all of Northern Europe is placed at completely unreasonable latitudes. Just because we have the North Atlantic current, we have remote heating, so to say. If that's going to be switched off, we're getting very, very cold. But still the Earth could get warmer on average. It's just a distribution problem now. In principle, there's no reason why the Earth could not get warmer, but still Northern Europe and North America could get cold. Still, that area is not large compared to the global area. What we know from the sudden climate changes in the past is that these abrupt changes represent a reconfiguration of the entire atmospheric pattern. What if, with the emission of greenhouse gases, that we trigger a situation when this system all of a sudden goes into a feedback? If you reconfigure the transport patterns of high pressures and low pressure systems over North America and, for instance, Europe, but particularly North America and the Midwest, and all of a sudden it stops to rain, and it hits the Midwest in the US, and it leads to massive crop failure, that's going to impact the entire world. We don't know. We don't know where the threshold is, but we are rats inside the experiment.
So very powerful message from J.P. Stephenson. But several years ago when I interviewed Richard Alley, another of the world's great climate scientists. He had just finished chairing a National Academy of Sciences year-long study of the idea of abrupt climate change. And what basically they had come away with was they were pretty sure that some of the really catastrophic changes that could possibly happen were not as likely to occur, say, in our lifetimes. But there's another type of abrupt change where gradual, slow changes in climate will suddenly overcome or overtop or undermine human infrastructure. And this is something that is of great concern and that we actually see happening now.
But we see more and more how gradual climate change can lead to abrupt shifts in ecosystems and in economies. And it is possible that you push something very gradually and suddenly it hits stuff that we care about. Either the storm surge is just below the levee in New Orleans and people living in New Orleans go about their business, or it's just above the levee in New Orleans and people in New Orleans are very, very unhappy about that. And a very gradual change in sea level, if we don't respond to it, can lead to an abrupt change with the water is in the city or it's in the subways of New York or what have you. And we have a lot of things that we've built that may be vulnerable to a gradual change pushing them over a threshold and causing an abrupt issue for us.
And so it is right here in my neck of the woods in Midland, Michigan, just a little bit north of the Edenville Dam. About a year ago, following torrential rains, failed.
There it goes. There it goes.
And when that dam failed, a large lake drained down into a lower lake, and another dam failed. And so within a short period of time, you had two large lake
there we go. There's
water
the rush.
Making their way into downtown Midland, and 10,000 people had to be evacuated. So this is an example of decaying infrastructure built to assumptions that were current perhaps 100 years ago and no longer make sense. But this kind of thing we're seeing happen now all over the country, and nowhere more acutely than just in the last week across the state of Texas. And this is going to be the main focus for the rest of the program here, because I think this event is incredibly important, incredibly instructive. It's a watershed. It tells us so much about what our energy grid is subject to, and what the potential for the increasing extreme events brought on by climate change is to disrupt our lives in very fundamental ways. It's not been a secret that natural gas systems and Texas is largely based and runs on natural gas, are subject to failure under weather extremes, particularly cold weather. And as this storm gathered, Lena Hidalgo, who is the judge or county executive of Harris County, which includes Houston, warned residents that they were headed for something as serious as a Category 5 hurricane. This was just Friday before Valentine's Day. And also on that same day, the Insurance Claims Journal published an article warning about infrastructure starting to crumble under the weight of this impending extreme event. The insurance industry, as we'll hear later, is extremely concerned about climate change. It is an existential threat to the insurance industry. And they comment here that they could see the natural gas pipes and processing plants starting to shut down as early as Friday the 12th. And we can see what happened after that. I'm going to walk you through this. You can follow the dates up in the top left here. starting early in February, this blob of cold air began to gather up in Alaska and Northwest Canada. And as it came down into the lower 48 United States, you can also see a gathering, another blob of warmer air, that red blob that you see there, moving up into the Arctic, this sort of countering force. And this pattern has come to be known as warm Arctic cold continents, or WAC, according to scientists. Is something we're seeing more and more under a climate change regime. And so by Sunday the 14th, I got on the phone to a friend of mine who's a retired utility executive in Austin, Texas. And he was able to pull up a few screens showing the current status of the Texas grid. And he said the numbers were changing dramatically right in front of his eyes. And he wondered aloud if the grid itself could actually fail, which is different from a blackout. An actual grid failure would be something that would last not just for hours or days, but potentially for weeks or months, and essentially could have put the whole state of Texas back into a pre-industrial stage. So that event peaked around the 16th and 17th, and we started to see these really severe impacts. And I've been following very excellent coverage on some of the local Texas news stations, notably KHOU in Houston.
4 minutes and 37 seconds. ERCOT revealing tonight that's how close Texas was from a total collapse of its power grid.
The controlled outages were implemented to prevent a statewide blackout. The only tools that we had to maintain control and not slip into a blackout in a much worse condition was these outages.
For the first time since last week's deadly freeze, ERCOT CEO Bill Magnus breaking down its response to the historic winter storm.
We started to see challenges. A lot of generation began to drop off, and as the storm system was blowing through the state, and one generator after another reported that they were tripped off, they were not able to operate.
A total of 356 generators went offline, most not winterized, leaving millions in the cold without power for a record nearly 71 hours in the state.
So I'm going to show you here some informed reaction to what happened and descriptions of what happened, starting with the Texas governor, Greg Abbott. And notably, when Governor Abbott was talking to Texas, to local media in Texas who knew the scope of the problem, and they knew accurately, in fact, what was happening, he was pretty straightforward. There's also a number of other very well-informed observers here that you're going to see in the next 2 minutes of clips. And it will give you a clearer idea of what was actually happening on the ground.
Every source of power that the state of Texas has been compromised.
The entire natural gas system from the wellhead to the power plant really just broke down.
Access to coal generated power, access to gas generated power also have been compromised, whether it be with regard to systems freezing up or equipment failures. It's just frozen right now. It's frozen in the pipeline. It's frozen at the rig. It's frozen in the transmission line. So they are incapable, the natural gas providers are incapable of being able to come up with a gas that feeds into the generators that generate the power that will send power to people's residences there in the Dallas area, as well as our nuclear power facility.
One of the lead reasons in the Houston area in particular that caused power outages is the South Texas nuclear project was shut down because of an operational difficulty.
Comanche Peak, which is a nuclear reactor, was within just minutes of going offline. And if that had happened, we really could have had a blackout.
By far the biggest piece, the piece that overwhelmed every other piece of the story is the way that the gas systems and the gas electricity wasn't there when we needed it.
Actually, it's more their natural gas plants that have been affected by the cold weather than it is their wind.
You'll hear the people who talked about the freezing of the wind turbines. It was a very small percentage of the power generation that was lost in Texas from renewables. The vast majority was from baseload generation.
During the daytime, solar was the one thing that far outperformed and gave us way more power than we expected.
It's a complex set of factors, but what we know right now is that the wind power plants are mostly meeting their expected performance levels. But what is not happening in Texas is that many of the thermal power plants, the plants that boil water to make electricity, like natural gas-fired power plants, coal-fired power plants, and at least one nuclear unit, are not producing energy. They're suffering outages, and that dwarfs the amount of wind resource that's not performing right now. So it really is a traditional power plant problem, not a clean energy problem.
This was an energy systems failure. This was a market failure, a regulatory failure. As an engineering professor, I look at this as a energy systems failure. I focus on that side of things. And to me, it's important that we realize that this can't be addressed within the electricity system alone, that this was really a matter of the mutual vulnerabilities of our gas system and our electricity system to each other.
So on the very same day that the Governor Abbott made those remarks to local Texas media, he went on Fox News and listened to the assessment that he gave.
Sean, this shows how the Green New Deal would be a deadly deal for the United States of America. Texas is blessed with multiple sources of energy, such as natural gas and oil and nuclear. But you saw from what Trace said, and that is our wind and our solar got shut down, and they were collectively more than 10% of our power grid. And that thrust Texas into a situation where it was lacking power in a statewide basis, that was power that was spread out by that ERCOT organization that you were talking about. As a result, it just shows that fossil fuel is necessary for the state of Texas as well as other states to make sure that we will be able to heat our homes in the wintertime and cool our homes in the summertime.
I saw some recent statistics that Governor Abbott's received something in recent years like $26 million in donations from the fossil fuel industry in Texas. Whether that had anything to do with the variation in his answers for local media and Fox News, you can decide. But this issue of grids and the integrity of our grids is absolutely essential in dealing with the kind of battering that's going to happen under extreme climate events. The US grid is basically divided into an eastern, a western, and a Texas sector. And while the eastern and western sectors both weathered the polar vortex fairly well, Texas did not do well and stands out pretty clearly in this nationwide map of outages. This is pretty much at the peak of the outage right here on the 15th. On the same day, just for comparison, you'll note that throughout the areas of the Midwest where there are large concentrations of wind power, grids seem to be faring pretty well because they're weatherized. The wind turbines are weatherized, as well as the other facilities are weatherized as differentiated from Texas. Iowa, for example, has a higher percentage penetration of wind energy than any other state at probably above 40% now. And during that peak of the polar vortex, out of 1.5 million customers tracked here, there were a total of 170 customers that were having outages during that time. So the Iowa grid was robust and resilient with 40% wind and a growing amount of solar. Scientists have been addressing this issue of the impact of climate on the changing extreme events that we're seeing and the potential impact on infrastructure like the grid. And I can't think of two better representatives of the science community than Catherine Hayhoe and Michael Mann, who you'll see here. These are two scientists at the very top of their profession, atmospheric science. And they're well known to me. I've interviewed them both numerous times, and we communicate on a pretty regular basis. And so I thought their words here would probably give us a pretty good sampling of what the scientific community is currently thinking about these events.
Well, first of all, in Texas, about every 10 years, there is a very severe cold wave with ice and snow that knocks out the power. It happened in 1989, there was a very big one. In 2011, there was a very large one. And after every single one of these winter storm events, there was a commission. There were findings saying that the power grid was not prepared, the gas plants were not prepared, the gas lines were not prepared, and they really should be winterized as they are winterized in other places further north. But each time those recommendations were ignored.
The feds had warned Texas of poor winterizing plans a decade ago after another big freeze crippled the state. But recommendations in this report, FERC's new chairman says, were largely ignored.
Now, as the world warms, we know that our weather is getting weirder. We know that heat waves are becoming more intense and more frequent. We know that wildfires are burning greater area from California to Alaska to Australia. We know that hurricanes, typhoons, and cyclones are getting stronger and more damaging. We know that our really expensive weather and climate events are getting worse. And we know that today we are already woefully unprepared for those changes, as this week has just showed us.
But there is a body of evidence now that suggests that global warming almost counterintuitively can sort of cause the polar vortex, as we call it, to weaken. And as it weakens, these blobs of cold air can more easily escape from the Arctic.
And in fact, this past week, some parts of the Arctic were over 15 degrees Celsius, almost 25 degrees Fahrenheit, warmer than they would be normally at this time of year.
So that it was actually warmer up in Alaska than it was down in Texas.
So the jet stream slows down and begins to meander. And scientists are not sure yet. This is still at the cutting edge of scientific research. We don't have a long enough satellite record to be sure, but there's some indication that as the Arctic warms much faster than the rest of the world, even though our winters are getting warmer, which they are, we could still be seeing these cold air outbreaks happening. So you would have warm, 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 cold, warm, 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 cold, as the world continues to get warmer.
There's some evidence that climate change might be leading to an increase in the incidence of these sorts of events. But there's no question that if we look collectively at all of the extreme weather events we've seen in recent years, unprecedented heat waves and droughts and wildfires and superstorms, we can see the fingerprint of human influence on our climate in these devastating events.
So I spoke to Dr. Daniel Cohan at Rice University just this morning. And we had a long conversation, but I asked him, okay, so going forward, based on what we know, what do we need to build?
What we're increasingly learning is that to build the decarbonized electricity systems of the future, that probably the two biggest pieces of them are going to be wind and solar. Is that wind and solar have both plunged in cost so deeply, so unexpectedly quickly, that those are now the cheapest, cleanest sources of power by every measure. Is that, when it comes to just what's the cheapest way to put an electron of power on the grid, wind and solar win hands down, at least if you're in terms of anything new that you're building. If you come to building anything from scratch, those are your cheapest power sources. So as much as we can lean on those cheapest, cleanest sources, we want that to be a big part of the mix.
So, and I'm sorry, I have to check and see which.
I can now imagine.
Yes. Okay. And I apologize. I'm going to have to. There we go. Yeah. So the problem that we have in doing what Dr. Cohan advises and building more wind and solar is that we're running into the same kind of misinformation, disinformation, and actually an added element of intimidation across the Midwest, across Michigan, in trying to deploy the needed solar and wind energy. And I've been tracking these procedures for the last 3 years, and getting to know some of the major players, and attending a tremendous number of local meetings and township halls, rural areas across the state of Michigan. And I want to make known to people what's going on out there, because for those of us that are very enthusiastic about deploying more clean energy, you have to know that the pathway to clean energy leads through rural America. And the choke point that the fossil fuel industry has identified is these vulnerable, underfunded township boards and county commissions and planning commissions, where a few poorly informed, conspiracy-minded people can cause a great deal of damage, just as we've seen in other events recently. So I want to address that in this next video.
This is Jas Nolan, an attorney who is frequently involved in anti-renewable energy efforts in the Midwest. Here, Mr. Nolan addresses a board in Burlington Township, Michigan.
Excuse me, sir. Excuse me, sir. No, I agree.
It was Dave's time.
How about then just shut the hell up?
It was Dave's original time.
I'll call a meeting. Please do.
In January 2019, Mr. Nolan addressed the Isabella County, Michigan Planning Commission, which had just unanimously approved a wind farm permit, making what many listeners interpreted as a thinly veiled legal threat against the commissioners. Listen and see what you think.
I don't really do this type of work, but there will be other lawyers that will be lining up to take these cases on contingency fees. And they will be coming after the county. And if I was in their shoes, I'd be looking at Apex, Epsilon, the county, and each one of you. And I would really encourage the county to up its liability policy before you complete this project. Have a good night, folks. Thank you.
Intimidation comes in many forms. At a planning commission meeting in North Branch, Michigan, a farmer stands up to read an abusive letter he has received from an anti-wind activist.
David, you're up first. You were the first one. I would rather you didn't read that letter.
Well, you weren't here at the township.
I already read the letter.
So you only made your perception. Can I read it?
You can read it if you choose. You think it's necessary. Please censor it.
Oh, I will. Did you read this letter? Yes. But anyways, I got that letter the day after Thanksgiving. Now I'm going to bleep out some of the words, but it shows you how degrading somebody is. It's pretty disturbing. But anyways, it's addressed to me. And then he says, then you must be one stupid blank idiot in a world where you're just a stupid blank farmer. He's a liar and a cheater, and he blanks everyone over. We don't need bullies in our town to get out and take blank face with you. Bold letters that says no bullies allowed. Now how would you like to get that letter the day after Thanksgiving? And it's unbelievable. So anyways, the opposition is being coached to put fear and intimidate people in the community.
On the other side of the state, in Casnovia, Michigan, a township supervisor recently described what happened as the board pondered a wind farm proposal.
I am proud and disappointed of our township. Most have come to these meetings calm and polite, even though we have our own perspectives on how this will affect our township. However, we have had some rude and disrespectful behavior. We've had vandalism at the town hall, we've had vandalism to our sign, and most recently, we've had some disrespectful behavior to one of our board members at the township hall. The township hall was closed Tuesday and Wednesday this week to avoid harsh conversations. During this meeting, outbursts of any remarks will not be tolerated, and threats to township officials will be prosecuted. I know it's tough, but we all need to behave.
Because these guys like this and this Keith Martis or Kevin Martis or whoever the hell he is on his social page has got that negativity, that fear factor, And that's what they're trying to send a message instead of going after the facts.
The name Kevin Martis is familiar to anti-renewable energy groups across the Midwest.
I'm also a senior policy fellow at E&E Legal Institute.
E&E Legal is a Washington, D.C. based lobbying group which receives substantial funding from the fossil fuel and coal industries. E&E Legal is nationally known over the past decade for a campaign of intimidation and bullying against scientists and academics across the country, like Malcolm Hughes of the University of Arizona.
I think psychologically it has a somewhat similar effect to living in a police state, because you learn to be extremely careful about what you say where in a way that stilts and stunts the free expression that needs to take place in an intellectually combative field like science.
For his part, Mr. Martis denies receiving any compensation from the fossil fuel industry for his extensive work and travel over many years.
And I'm not a paid lobbyist, and I donate my time. Sometimes people will give me an honorarium.
Recently, on his Facebook page, Mr. Martis posted a recipe for anti-renewable energy activists who wish to influence township and county officials. He writes, "Your county commissioners will not be moved by facts. They will be moved by political fear. If your plan for success involves urging the county government to take steps that require some blend of courage and intelligence, you will lose." For whatever reasons, Kevin Martis, Josh Nolan, and others like them continue to work against the best interests of farmers, families, and communities in rural America, and against the well-being of future generations of Americans. But across the Midwest, the transition to renewable energy is only picking up steam. As more and more Americans step up to demand real energy independence with power that is clean, inexpensive, abundant, and ensures our children's future.
So, a lot of people don't know what's going on out there. I can't stress strongly enough the need for you to know and for you to take action. And we'll talk about that later. But last thing, in November, Americans decided that we're going to take a different path on energy than we have for the last 4 years. And we took a very powerful step yesterday towards that in confirming Jennifer Granholm as the new Secretary of Energy, former Governor of Michigan, Jennifer Granholm. And we've been waiting for that actually because I had done a video about it and we couldn't drop it until she actually got confirmed. But here it is, and it is descriptive of what the path forward could be if we want it, if we're willing to work for it and make it happen.
I can now imagine that the 2024 primaries will be a competition between which party has the even bolder climate action.
Saul Griffith holds a PhD from MIT, is a recipient of the MacArthur Foundation's so-called Genius Award, and CEO of Other Lab, an independent research and design firm.
And the Republicans who have been slow on this issue will find religion in the next few years, because finally they will be able to declare that the free market has won, and solar and batteries and electric vehicles and electrified heat and heat pumps and HVAC have all matured because of the power of capitalism and the free market, and will be ready for very bold action.
Environmental protection program is actually an economic development program.
And unfortunately, workers have been fed a false narrative. The notion that somehow dealing with climate is coming at their expense.
There's no jobs program in history that's as big as the jobs program that would be decarbonizing America.
We can put people to work using the skills they currently have where they are, to start looking at those old abandoned oil and gas wells that are spewing out methane, or all of the coal that is mines that haven't been properly closed, that are doing the same, that has great impact on climate, but also will keep an opportunity for those individual workers to have work in their own communities.
To get America to the climate place it needs to be by 2040 or 2035, we need a couple million electrical technicians, a couple more million as HVAC technicians, and a couple more million as utility scale solar and wind technicians and installers.
We're not going to ask people to go from the middle of Ohio or Pennsylvania and ship out to the coast to have solar jobs. You know, solar jobs will be everywhere, but we need to put people to work in their own communities. That's where their home is.
The largest fleet of competent people in America's energy infrastructure drive white trucks and have been working either installing natural gas or maintaining electricity lines or otherwise maintaining this infrastructure. That you cannot solve this without that workforce.
They're talking jobs in renewable energy generation, jobs in manufacturing, transportation, electric transportation vehicles.
The federal government owns and maintains an enormous fleet of vehicles, as you all know. We're going to harness the purchasing power of the federal government to buy clean, zero-emission vehicles that are made and sourced by union workers right here in America.
But make no mistake, this is General Motors and Mary Barra making a very clear and declarative statement right now. They will be fully electric, and they plan to be there at least by 2035.
Amazon bought 100,000 new electric vans made from parts in the United States, powered by renewable energy. More of those vans are going to be powered by renewable energy in the Midwest than ever before.
Now imagine the middle class in America and around the world aligning their economic interests with bold climate action in the near term, and then realizing, because at scale it's such an enormous group of people, that this works and is going to drive good economics.
Jennifer Granholm is the former governor of Michigan, an enthusiastic proponent of clean energy, and the newly designated Secretary of Energy.
You know that our economic competitors, our other nations, are in the game and are eating us for lunch. We can be at the table or we can be on the table.
Energy consultant Skip Pruss is former chief energy advisor to Governor Granholm.
Banks are moving aggressively away from investing in fossil fuels. The world's largest banks, the World Bank, BlackRock, the world's largest asset management firm.
As we start to have wildfires in California, storms in the Southeast, flooding in the Southeast, insurance is watching this very, very carefully. The Society of Actuaries did a survey last year, and climate change popped to the top of the list of concerns among underwriters.
Lloyd's of London in the last month has announced that they will quit insuring tar sands and tar sand development companies and in thermal coal in 2022.
People hear, oh, wait a minute, insurance companies? They don't have a political dog in this fight, and yet they're just looking at the numbers, and they're hiring climate scientists to figure out how they can price their instruments to provide insurance.
Swiss Re, Munich Re, Hartford Insurance, Zurich Insurance, they've expressed their future intent to no longer insure pipelines.
Where maybe government isn't going to get their act together and do this, insurance companies may do it for them.
We will win this fight, and we will win this fight on a classical American libertarian individual rights victory that will be bipartisan.
So this is something that can happen, and it is happening, but it won't happen fast enough if enough people don't get involved behind it and push. And a huge part of that push is going to be in rural America. And I live in a small town. A lot of other people in Michigan live in small towns. We may spend a lot of time in rural in rural areas. We may know a lot of people in rural areas, but we have a lot of allies out there. And although there is a divide, there is a conservative, liberal, Republican, Democrat divide from the rural areas and the cities. But nevertheless, in my advocacy work across the Midwest, I've continued to find allies, of all political persuasions who are united behind the idea that renewable energy, clean energy, is a worthwhile goal, and the development and the benefits to the rural communities that have been hollowed out over the last 30 years is a worthy goal, something that we can pursue together. And so I've been working with people across the political spectrum, and what I'm finding is that there's a diverse cross section of landowners, citizens, public officials, unions, environmental activists, farmers, electrical utilities, and even religious groups, from left to right across the political spectrum. And at a time in this country that we are perhaps more divided than just about any of us can remember, the effort to transition to clean energy is one of the most constructive, collaborative, respectful, and productive dialogues across political boundaries that's happening anywhere in the United States right now. I want to invite you all to become part of that dialogue. And to that end, I'm going to give you some tools that you can come out of this meeting tonight and begin immediately to interact and to start making a difference in your community and your larger community across the state and across the heartland in pushing for more clean energy, solar, and wind. Part of that is a whole bunch of resources and tools that I have collected at a couple of websites, wind101.info and sun101.org. And again, I'll be sharing these links with you. And there are a huge number at each of these sites of links and of videos, like the ones that you've seen, only specific to renewable energy, that you can share, that you can enter into discussions with, and that you can use to inform yourself when confronted with the type of disinformation that we have seen. And it's important to realize that it's not necessary to convince everybody to be as passionate as you might be about climate change, because the great thing about clean energy is that it has advantages that rise above and beyond any of the environmental considerations in terms of benefits to rural economies, to roads, schools, sheriff's patrols, fire rescues, senior citizen services, libraries, pensions, all of which have been suffering and underfunded, but which we're seeing amazing turnarounds in communities where wind and solar development are going in and adding new tax base. We're seeing farmers that are able to keep their farms in the family, where younger farmers who might have been ready to leave and give up are now seeing that there's potential to have drought-proof, flood-proof income 20, 30 years or more into the future to make farming a viable enterprise. So, what I'm gonna do is stop the share here, and I am going to be pasting into the chat a number of links. First of all, to here we go. First of all, to Wind 101 and Sun 101, and also to some Facebook pages where local citizens are taking action right here in Michigan on both sun and wind. And what you can do is access those resources at Wind 101 and Sun 101, and then start to enter into discussions. Like those pages, enter into discussions. Be polite, be respectful. Don't get drawn into a mud fight with trolls. Just post good information and withdraw if that's what it takes. And continue to come back to those pages where I will be refreshing good, useful information on a regular basis from here on. So I hope that this has been valuable to some of you. I hope that you will consider inviting me to your community or to your Zoom to spread more of this information. I'm happy to come. And I'm also very, very enthusiastic to answer any questions you may have and facilitate any discussion that we might have in the remaining time. So thank you all for coming out. I can't express my gratitude enough, and also to Jeremy and to all the organizers. So thank you again, and I welcome any further discussion.
Ladies and gentlemen, if you know where your mute button is, go ahead and unclick your mute button. And let's just say a collective thank you to Peter. So unclick your mute button and thank him.
Thank
from
you.
YouTube.
Thank you.
Interest in helping.
Thank you.
Thank
you. Great work.
Animals are fans, Peter.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Excellent.
So
Peter,
so,
thank you. I was gonna initiate the chat to see what the questions might be from the group.
I just saw one that I think is worthwhile. It says, any comments about the Michael Moore movie Planet of the Humans?
Yes.
I have a great story about that, actually, because it turns out, I knew Michael Moore before he was the Michael Moore, right? I knew Michael Moore when he was skinny, actually. And so when that movie came out, I was just appalled, and like a number of really good takedowns of that movie have been written, and they're easy to find. And I wasn't going to write one myself, but then in some of the follow-up to that movie, I saw Mr. Moore post some things that I knew from my own direct experience were absolutely false. So I wrote a post on my blog, climatecrocs.com, and it went viral in a modest sort of way. And about 2 days after I got that post, I got a private message on Facebook from an attorney in New York City named Joanne DeRocho, who is currently, she is director of something called the Center for Justice and Democracy at New York University Law School. But in a previous life, she worked for Michael Moore as part of his organization. And her job was as a fact checker and a ghostwriter on several of his movies and several of his books. In fact, in his book, Downsize This, he mentions her in the acknowledgements and says that she is one of the most honest people that he's ever met. And so what Joanne DeRocho told me is that she was involved in fact checking intimately or intricately movies like Fahrenheit 9/11 and Sicko and some of the other classic Michael Moore movies, which did adhere rigorously to fact. Then something happened. There was a falling out. She left the organization, and there was another person there who is actually the director of that movie, Planet of the Humans, and his name escapes me right at the moment. But she said this.
Jeff Gibbs, dear heart.
Jeff Gibbs, thank you. And she said Jeff Gibbs was someone that was prone to conspiracy theories and flights of fantasy, and that the fact-checking team never let him anywhere within 10 miles of the fact-checking process while she was there. But that since she's left, she felt that he had gained more influence in the organization and actually directed that movie, which she found to be a kind of a tragic mess, as so many other knowledgeable observers have pointed out. So, you know, I think that movie really, until Michael Moore disavows that movie, I think his credibility, except in some, you know, pretty far corners of the left, and tragically now he's a hero on the white supremacist right wing as well.
Michael.
So anyway, that's what I think of that movie, and that's my informed opinion.
Peter, got a good question here. Before we go on this next question, here's what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna mute everybody out, and then I'm gonna unmute you, okay? Just so we can catch some of the some of the backlash from me having everyone unmute all their cameras. Mute all, cool. Ask to unmute. I just clicked the screen. Peter, you should see a button on your screen that says you should unmute now.
Very good. Yep.
Perfect. Okay, great. Hey, from Gerard, how can stopping climate change and capitalism coexist?
How can stop? So you're saying, how can we stop climate change if we still have capitalism? I guess that's the way I read that.
Yeah, if there's a whole bunch of huge industries that live inside of the capitalism model who are making money off of doing things around the world that create climate change, and they're the heads of a capitalist model potentially, won't they fight climate change till the end? And if they're at the top of at the capitalist model, how can capitalism exist if stopping climate change makes their business extinct?
Well, if we precondition action on climate with some kind of sociological change and leaving capitalism behind, you know, it's paralyzing. And what I would say is empowering ourselves and empowering local communities is probably the most valuable thing that we can do if we're concerned about the too great a concentration of power in centers of capital and large industrial corporations. Because the thing that clean energy does is that it diffuses power away from central authorities. And follow me on this a little bit. If there's one thing I've observed about power over the years, is that power follows money. And the way that our electric production grid has been set up over the last 120 years is that we have these large generation plants that are then all the rest of us are sort of on these bicycle spokes out around the edges, and we're all like entirely dependent upon a few big generation facilities. Okay, and so every time we turn on a light in Midland, Michigan, or Merrill, Michigan, or Northport, Michigan, electricity comes from somewhere, and money goes away. It goes away from our community, and it goes who knows where, to a coal company or a uranium company, or most likely just a bank in New York City somewhere. Okay, but as we have more wind turbines and more solar farms situated in widely dispersed areas across the state, across the Midwest, across the heartland, then more and more, if I'm in Breckenridge, Michigan, and I turn on a light now, because I'm surrounded by wind turbines, that generation is happening locally. And the electricity that I use is generating capital, money, financial resources, a good portion of which stays in my community, and it goes to local farmers, and it goes to schools and teachers, and it goes to firemen, and it goes to road workers, and it goes to senior citizens, and it enriches the community and makes our rural communities even more attractive places to live than they already are. And moreover, it empowers them, because when these small communities at the township level, at the county level, have the resources to make decisions, then they are empowered to no longer be beholden to big sources of political power, big sources of economic power. They can begin to make their own decisions. Democracy can flourish more genuinely with a more distributed electrical grid. I realize it's not the total answer, it's not the final answer, but it is a way to begin. Okay, so above all, we have to not be paralyzed, and we have to find a way to begin. And I think renewable distributed energy is a great way.
Amazing. There are some questions definitely coming in. One of them is, please comment on the role of energy efficiency to help reduce that energy dollar drain you were talking about.
Yeah, it's absolutely critical. And you saw Saul Griffith, who I interviewed for that last video, brilliant guy. And he makes the point that it's a very important part of the equation that that energy efficiency and changing the way that we use energy be a part of the solution. And some of that is kind of built into the deployment of renewable energy. For instance, 13% of the energy that the world uses is used solely to explore for, drill, mine, and process and transport fossil fuels. So to the degree that we begin to pull ourselves away from fossil fuels, we're negating the need for more than a tenth of the world's energy right there. Let's say that we begin to move towards electric vehicles. An electrically powered vehicle is so much more efficient than a gas-powered vehicle that the absolute amount of primary energy that we use for our transportation begins to go down. And in fact, electrifying our society, because electricity is so much higher quality of primary energy, means that it's a tremendous savings in waste, because we're not burning everything. And when you burn something for energy, you're automatically going to lose half or 2/3 of that just as heat going away. But with electricity, you're going to be using a lot more of that energy directly for whatever the task is. So transitioning our houses, for instance, from gas-fired furnaces, most of us are gas-fired, to say heat pumps, which are becoming much more efficient, and ultimately end up using less primary energy than what we do if we're all dependent on gas. So in a sense, we're going to use more electricity, but less total energy as we electrify the economy. So this is a very important concept to gather. And what I don't want people to come away with is some kind of attitude of guilt tripping somebody that's driving an SUV or that is booked a flight somewhere or something like that. What we need to be thinking about is the big picture, electrifying society, moving to renewable energy, starting with the low-hanging fruit, which is shutting down coal plants, and eventually moving on to the more difficult problems like, for instance, electrifying flight, which is happening a lot faster than most people realize. So I don't want people to be neurotic about their own energy use. I don't want people to be angry about somebody else's energy use. I want them to get active in a political, societal way and move us all towards greater reliance on renewable energy and towards greater deployment of renewable energy.
Amazing. Amazing. Hey, before we take the next question, I'm going to invite everyone to take a moment to use the chat and type in what has been the top takeaway, the biggest learning that you've had from being here with Peter. What's the top takeaway, the biggest learning, the biggest aha? Or maybe you have an intention. Maybe this is just affirming something you thought and now you have an intention. But in the chat, go ahead and type what has been your biggest takeaway, your biggest learning, and or share an intention that you want to set for how you want to take this information forward, whether it is getting involved with a local government, whether it is being willing to just post some of these links online, affirming, yes, how damaging disinformation is. Yeah, what has been your biggest takeaway? A little uplifting music for our takeaways. There are solutions and there is good momentum. Seeing the big crowd here. Awesome. All politics are still local. Optimism about the future. Let's get involved. Love my solar. Thanks, Vicky. Take away. Free enterprise will free us from the grip of the fossil fuel system. Holding those who are elected accountable. It's in our hands. Great work, everyone. Hashtag solar works in Michigan.
I like it.
Another question. How can we use fear in a positive way to change and move towards renewable? So how can we use fear in a positive way to move more towards renewable energy?
Well, fear is a rational emotion in the face of something as dire as climate change. But the most important thing is not to let it paralyze you. And the best way for that to happen is to inform yourself and educate yourself and take action. Okay, because in another life, I was a paramedic. I was an emergency responder for 15 years. And fear is something that you run into when you're going into situations where everybody else is running the other way and you're expected to run into it. But having good information and knowing what to expect and knowing what you're going to do is a great remedy for fear. So that's why I hope people will take advantage of some of the video resources that I'm providing, not just about renewable energy, but about the actual problem of climate change itself. Because I've, for instance, done videos kind of pushing back against what Michael Mann calls doomism. In other words, it's all over, we're done, there's nothing we can do, everything's terrible, and human extinction is inevitable. And when people come to me and say, well, human beings are going extinct in the next 10 or 12 years or imminently, and I tell them, we're not getting off that easy. we've got work to do. This is a problem that's going to be with us for the rest of our lives and for unforeseen generations of human beings going into the future are going to be working on this and dealing with it and hopefully solving it. And the great thing is that this moment in history, this generation of human beings, all of us that are alive here right now, have greater leverage over the well-being of the next 50,000 generations of human beings than has ever been possible in history. So every action that you take is magnified by unimaginable factors in the power that you have, above and beyond the power of any previous generation in history. So don't take lightly, even if you think, you know, I have no power, I have no position. You are just by virtue of being here in a position to exercise enormous benefit to your children, your grandchildren, and descendants unseen for tens of thousands of years into the future. Grab that opportunity, take that opportunity, because that's what's going to save us if enough people wake up to that. That's my answer to fear.
Excellent. What do you think about the carbon tax? Was it going to happen soon?
Well, I think a carbon tax would be a great thing. And maybe it's politically possible, maybe it's not, but there can be such a thing as a people's carbon tax. And that is if we apply resistance to perhaps fossil fuel projects that we think are ill-advised and should not go forward. The action that activists took against the pipelines in the Midwest is a pretty good example of what I would call a people's carbon tax. Just making it less easy for big powerful entities to keep going ahead with poorly advised projects, which won't ultimately do them any good and certainly won't do the rest of us any good either, because we're at the point where large investments in carbon energy are gonna end up as stranded assets either in the near or mid future. And so we're helping people if we just kind of apply some intelligent pressure and even kindness in getting them to slow down and getting them to think about what they're doing. So carbon tax, sure, but in the meantime, there's action, plenty of things to do.
Awesome. I think we've got time for one more question. And a line 5 question. There was a line 5 question in here. I saw that question. Where is that line 5? Whoever asked the line 5 question, if you could put the question back in the chat, that would be incredible. The line 5 question. I think it was, oh, here we go. Oh, no, that's Bill saying that's why we're working to shut down line 5. The line 5 question was along the lines of, how can Michigan justify not shutting down line 5 with all of this information? How is that possible?
Well, I don't know. And I would say work with groups like For Love of Water Flow in Traverse City on line 5. It's an issue that I wish I had more time to be informed on, but I know there's a lot of people throughout the state of Michigan who are well informed and are working hard on that. And that's a perfect example of a huge investment potentially that could end up not really paying off for the people that are making it, and least of all for the rest of us at large. So, you know, I would encourage you to work with some of those groups if you feel that that's something that's really speaking to you. because all of us that live in Michigan are deeply attached to the beauty and the purity of those waters up there around Line 5. That's a place where part of my soul lives, no doubt. So again, For Love of Water is a group that has done a tremendous amount of good information work on that, and I would encourage you to join up with them.
We need to continue pressure on Governor Whitmer. Sources say that she will be compromising with Enbridge and allowing the tunnel to go through and allowing the oil line 5 to flow if they follow a 5-year timeline. So it sounds like we need to continue to put pressure on Governor Whitmer. How does one put pressure on a governor? Like, what does that look like? What's the process to pressure a governor?
Well, first of all, the first thing to remember is that Governor Whitmer is our friend. Governor Whitmer is a powerful ally in a very important position, and she's subject to an awful lot of pressure. And we need to apply a persuasion. I prefer the word persuasion rather than pressure. And I hope that people will do all the things that that our system affords us. Contact our representatives, contact the governor directly, and when there are actions to take, insofar as making public statements about your feelings about Line 5, I say, get out there and do it. But every month that goes by, the evidence just continues to pile up about the futility of continuing to push dirty oil through that line. And as you heard in one of the videos, with the auto companies moving rapidly towards electrification, the economic case for more oil, particularly more oil extracted from sources like tar sands, it just becomes more ludicrous every day.
Ann, yes, I can't tell. Are you waving at me or you want to unmute? I got it. 3, 2, 1. Nope. Got it. Nailed it. Oh, nope.
Not.
David, you might need to tilt the screen up. Tilt the screen up a little bit or something. The trick that you do. Nope, not there yet. You got some sort of a double mute. You might have a double mute.
It's not working.
Nope, we can't hear you. You might have to do a little more of a tilt even.
Does the manager is that work?
The angle.
Is that working?
Yes.
Gotcha.
Yes. Go ahead.
Okay. All right. A couple of comments. I think all of us need to be looking at going after our pensions companies or the college or our government to defund from fossil fuels. And it's a hard thing to do. I've been working on NMC for several years now, but I think this is tremendously important because everything is about money. The other thing too that I wanted to ask is, I know some of you are taking notes, and I think that if we can compile a list of all of the possibilities of things that people can do, because we can share it with other groups and other people that aren't tuned in today, and we can make a bigger push across the state for getting off of fossil fuels. And I would like to see, because everybody can't do everything, but everybody can do something, and it's going to take all of us working. So thank you all, and thank you, Peter and Jeremy and Bill. And this has been, I'm looking forward to being able to share the recordings, especially with our city and county commissioners who I invited, but I don't see any of them here. So we need to get the message out and hammer on it. Repeat, repeat, repeat. Thank you.
Hey, how many of you would be willing to do this again and invite a friend? Raise of hands if you'd be willing to do this again and invite a friend. Awesome. And to honor Anne's request of collecting all of the information of what it is that we can do, if you have an idea of something that you know is a practical way to create progress towards renewable energy, type it in the chat. One of the best ways for us to capture that information is right now, because this chat will be captured. We'll be able to save all of this chat, and we'll find someone who will sift through it and find all the most valuable information. I don't know who that person will be yet, but I know that we can find someone who will do it. So if you have any ideas, any thoughts that weren't mentioned already by Peter, put them in the chat. This is an opportunity to source your wisdom into this group experience, and then through a follow-up email with the different links, have a handful of these different ways of creating progress to accompany the links and the recording. There's still 96 people at 8:33 p.m. on a Friday night.
That's amazing.
What a great group. Oh, wait, I see that there's a hand raised up here. Sometimes the hand raise is not a actual hand raise. It's just someone who found a button that they hit on the way to the chat. So, Christina Karras, do you have your hand up, or was that a mistapped hand raise? Looks like a mistapped hand raise.
Okay.
Hey, one more time, if we can all unmute. Actually, before we unmute, all of us unmute, I see a hand up by Terry Miller. Terry, did you mean to put your hand up?
Yes. I wondered if I could comment because I'm with the group Lone Tree Council. Great job, Peter. Great job. One of the things I wanted to suggest is, in addition to opposing fossil fuels and the capitalization of fossil fuel plants, by all means, invest your resources in renewables. A friend of mine, whenever we get a few cents, wind, sun power, anything that is hydrogen, anything that is renewable, capitalism can work if invested properly. And these companies need to be funded. So just a suggestion.
Terry, fantastic.
They've done very well.
Terry, top 2 strategies for someone on this call who says, I have a few cents that I could invest into these companies. I haven't thought of that. Terry, great idea. What are the 1 or 2 links or websites that you would recommend that they visit?
Oh, making investment information is kind of dangerous, but
it is dangerous.
If you just Google,
there you go,
and energy companies, renewable energy companies, top sun, top solar, top wind, Vestas, the big producer of wind. Hydrogen is big. I'm trying to find a company that is publicly traded in geothermal, because geothermal has a lot of potential. So get that Google site up and look. There's a lot of recommendations.
Great job, both with the recommendation and also being very very mindful about how you answer that, Terry. Very much appreciated.
You're welcome.
Bill, I see you've got your hand up.
I do. Thank you, Jeremy. I just want to let everybody know that this was recorded, and we are going to be posting this over on the NMEAC website and also on the My Climate, or the Michigan Climate Action Network website. So after this is done, we're going to send an email out to everybody that attended and didn't attend with a link that you could look at this again and show it to other people, or share it however you like.
Awesome. And Bill, thank you so much again for your help in putting all this together and all the tech.
My pleasure.
Hey, last thing before we go. Oh, Peter.
No, I just said great job. Great job.
Oh.
Yeah.
Yeah, Bill crushed it. Last thing before we go, a special treat. One of the things that I found to be very powerful at the end of a presentation like this is to open it up to 2, 3, 4 of you to just share an appreciation for Peter, who has really dedicated his life to being able to synthesize information and then put it together so eloquently and in a way that actually entertains us at the same time. I don't know about all of you, but we've all been on a lot of Zooms, and look at us, we're still here, because his presentation was so engaging. So this is an opportunity. If 1, 2, 3 of you want to come on, have your voice heard, and share. Trisha, I see that you're already volunteering, and just appreciate anything you'd like to about Peter and his presentation.
I just wanted to thank you for making visible to us, to the planet, what it has been invisible. We can't do something about what we don't see or what we don't know. So thank you very much.
You're so welcome. Thank you.
We love you, Peter.
Stop.
Marge, is it Marge or Margie?
Marge, subscribe to Peter's blog through your email to receive Climate Crocs.
Absolutely.
Awesome. I see we've got, let me see, I think I see Anne's hand up.
Yes.
Perfect.
We first met Peter back when he was coming up to the Pioneers at the college when way back. And NMEAC has hosted him many times for the city and whoever else wanted to come. And as we've met with him over the years, we've learned to really trust and appreciate his information and his suggestions and his caring, the amount of energy that it takes to go into all of this. So thank you, Peter, and hopefully we'll be able to host you in person one of these days very soon.
Fingers crossed.
Awesome. And Maria, I think I see you just unmuted.
Oh, well, I was just going to say thank you, but also, yes, the amount of caring and the generosity that Peter has exhibited through the years has been absolutely amazing and very, very much needed and appreciated. Thanks, Peter.
Thank you. Thank you, Maria. Well, that's embarrassing.
Go ahead, raise your hand.
Oh, wait, no, I hear someone being prompted to raise their hand. I think was it Maureen and John?
Peter, we exposed you to friends and family outside of Michigan, California, Georgia, etc.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
Excellent.
That's a yes. Okay.
Okay. Wonderful. Thank you.
Here's how I'm feeling that we can close this. So one of the ways that we can open and close events is with song. I happen to have a guitar right next to me.
Thank you, Jeremy.
So we can close this with a song, and I wanna dedicate this song to two things. One is I want to dedicate this song to three things. Number one, to Peter. You have to love the earth to go into the depths of the earth to discover the things that you've discovered and to be in the places that you've been. So thank you. Number two is that you said multiple times through this is what I heard is to be compassionate. Whether it's with Governor Whitner or with if it's someone with an opposing view, it's we're all in this together. And if we lead with any sort of judgment or hate or trying to be mean or disrespectful in any way, that's potentially not going to get us where we want to get. But to be compassionate, to understand that people are walking their own walk and on their own path, and to look for ways to be more loving and compassionate versus divisive and angry, that will get further in that way. And last, I want to dedicate this song to my dad, which many of you knew, who was just an amazing environmental warrior. And when I think about what the world needs more of, one thing he taught me is to have hope and to have love. So to end this evening, this is a little song called Love.
In this life of ours, how will we use our hearts? Being human will we play these cards? With every choice, we choose our noise. With every look, we use our voice. It's time to stop in the name of love. Drop all the petty stuff. Love is gonna show us the way. Wear it like a body glove. Give away a big hug. Time to demonstrate a little bit of love, love, love. So much love between you and me. Love, love, love. Love remembers the little things. La, 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 love. Love is the puzzle piece that we need. Love, 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 love. Give me the beatbox. So as we finish up this song, I'll invite you in a word, in a phrase, or in a sentence to set an intention for the way that you want to show up as you leave this call. A word, a phrase, or a sentence in the chat. Go ahead and put it in the chat. What is a word, a phrase, or a sentence that captures the way that you want to leave this call? Well, come on. Let's get up and play. Oh, enjoy every day. With these words we say, what will we create? When we look into each other's eyes, when we look for strengths, we can realize we can't stop in the name of love. Drop all the petty stuff. Love is gonna show us the way. Come on, wear it like a body glove. Give away a big hug. Time to demonstrate a little bit of love, love, love. So much love between you and me. Love, love, love. Love, remember the little things. La, 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 love. Love is the puzzle piece that we need. Love, 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 love. Love, 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 love. Someone's singing with me. Did you hear that? I had a background singer and I didn't even know it. Ladies, gentlemen, kids, dogs, pets from all over Michigan and from all over, thanks so much for being here with NMEAC, with Flo, and with the Michigan Climate Action Network, and with Peter Sinclair. Again, thank you, Bill. Thank you, June. Thank you, Ann, David. Let's all unmute and say goodbye all at once.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank
you.
you.
Bye.
You again.
Bye.
Thank you,
Peter, for
Peter.
your music,
Bye.
Thank
your message.
Be safe, everyone.
Thank you, Peter.
Thank
Be
you,
well.
Peter.
Thanks, Peter.
It's a great tune.
Great tune.